Have you ever felt like all the love you gave someone had simply been thrown away? As if, from one moment to the next, you ceased to exist in the life of the person you most lovingly raised? Well, that's exactly how I felt when my own son turned his back on me. After a lifetime of sacrifice and dedication, all I received in return was silence. A painful silence, the kind that screams from within. And the worst part? There wasn't even a fight. There was no argument, no official breakup. Just the breakup. A dry, cold distance. As if I were an old piece of a puzzle he no longer wanted to put together. What hurts isn't the absence itself, it's the ingratitude, the family rejection, the cutting of ties, the pain of a mother who gave everything and got nothing. But life has a curious way of taking turns. When the jackpot knocked on my door, I could hardly believe it. I'd won the lottery, literally, an unexpected victory, a fresh start. But this time, I was the priority. For the first time, I had the chance to choose what to do with my worth, my story, my pain, and my newfound freedom. And do you know what happened next? Guess who showed up with sweet words as if nothing had happened? That's right, him. The son who discarded me as if a mother's love had an expiration date. Suddenly, he seemed to have remembered I existed, that I had a name, that maybe I was still useful, but I wasn't the same anymore. This story isn't about money. It's about emotional justice, about self-worth, about life's upheaval when you think you've lost everything. If you've ever felt invisible, betrayed, or used by someone in your own family, stay with me, because this story is for you. I always thought a mother's love was enough, that it was enough to give everything, protect, welcome, love without measure, and the rest would fall into place. But that wasn't quite the case. When my son decided to leave me, it was as if a part of my body had been ripped out without anesthesia. He didn't scream, he didn't fight, he just disappeared. You realize you're being left behind when your messages go unanswered. When you call and the line goes blank. And suddenly, the son you raised so lovingly seems to treat everyone else as a priority. What was once a close bond turns into a painful silence, a chasm that opens right in the middle of your routine, and you don't even understand why. I tried to find explanations. Had I said something wrong? Had I demanded too much? Or was it simply that I was no longer needed in his life? These questions consumed me for weeks, months, because emotional abandonment doesn't come with a warning. It comes slowly, stealthily, until the day you realize you're alone. It's hard to accept that someone you raised with a mother's love can choose to go on with their life as if you never existed. As if all the sleepless nights, the maternal sacrifices, the advice, the hugs, were no longer valuable. My son's ingratitude cut me deep. It was a severing of ties that bled more than any physical wound. And the worst part wasn't his absence. It was the feeling of uselessness that remained. Because when the person you love most acts like you're a burden, you start to believe it too. And then comes the weight, the fatigue, the doubt. I even thought maybe he was right to walk away, that I really was disposable. A mother betrayed by her own son. No one teaches us how to deal with family rejection. We grow up hearing that mothers are sacred, that children are everything. But what happens when they aren't? What happens when the child you cradled in your arms simply ignores you as if you didn't exist? It's a pain that has no name, a void that sets in and never seems to go away. But look, it's there, at rock bottom, that we begin to see more clearly. Because sometimes you have to lose your footing to realize who's truly willing to lend you a hand. And there, in the cruelest solitude, I began, without knowing it, to prepare the ground for my unexpected new beginning. And that part was still to come. Raising my son alone was never easy, but it was never a choice either. It was what had to be done, and I did it. I worked double shifts, pulled all-nighters, stretched thin, to get everything done. When he was sick, I held him tight. When he cried, I wiped his tears before mine. While other women planned trips, I calculated how to stretch my grocery money until the end of the month. Maternal sacrifices don't appear in family photos, but they're there, In the bills paid, the clothes passed down from brother to brother, the coffee you skip to ensure the children have milk. I did all this without a second thought. I remember how many times I went to bed worried, but I didn't let him see it. I became an expert at disguised smiles. I wanted him to grow up light, without carrying the weight of our hardship. Because a mother's love is like this. If necessary, we swallow our tears, but we never let affection go unnoticed. And I never did. Every achievement of his was a victory for me. When he learned to walk, I cried as if it were graduation. When he was accepted into college, my heart almost burst with pride. I thought all this love, all these years of dedication, would be too strong a foundation for any kind of breakup. I was wrong. He never saw the times I was humiliated by a boss and still came home smiling. He never knew about the bills I let fall behind to pay for his prep school. He never understood that, while he was growing up with dreams, I was shelving mine. Not because I regretted it, but because I chose to. For him. Maybe that's why his coldness hurt so much. Because I didn't just see the distance. I saw the stark contrast between everything I'd given and the emptiness I'd received in return. That ungrateful son wasn't the same boy I'd held in my arms. And this conflict between past and present broke my heart every day. Even so, for a long time, I kept waiting for him to remember the cold nights I'd tuck him in, the cartoons we'd watch together, the scoldings that always came with a touch of care. Because when you love so much, it's hard to accept that maybe that love was only felt by one person. After he left, the house felt emptier than ever. It wasn't just his physical absence. It was as if the air had lost its sweetness. Every corner held a memory. His favorite dish, the sound of his slippers in the hallway, even the sound of the door slamming shut when he came home late from school. Everything became silent, and not just any silence, the kind that hurts. I tried to maintain some kind of routine, making coffee as always, tidying the house, ironing, but it was as if I were acting out a life that was no longer mine. Without him there, everything felt out of place. It was a loneliness that went hand in hand with heartbreak every day. I felt small within my own story. The nights were the worst. I'd sit on the couch, staring at the TV without really watching it, waiting for a message, a call, any sign. The pain of a rejected mother isn't loud. It's quiet. It's a lump in the throat that won't go away, a tear that won't fall, but weighs heavily on the eyes. Family separation hurts because it comes without explanation. I even wondered if he was okay, if he was eating, if he was sleeping properly, if he needed anything. And at the same time, I wondered, does he think about me? Does he miss me? Or was that toxic relationship he claimed existed just an excuse to get rid of me? This doubt gnawed at me. It was during this phase that I understood what it means to be invisible within motherhood itself. You give yourself completely, and then it's as if your role has ended, as if you were replaceable, disposable, an old object that has already served its purpose. Elderly people become invisible, that's the expression. And unfortunately, this is the reality for many mothers out there. I stopped trying, not out of anger, but out of exhaustion. Because loving someone who rejects you is exhausting. And when love turns to suffering, it's time to take a deep breath and retreat, even with a heavy heart, even with the longing. Because continuing to try when all you get is silence is a kind of emotional abandonment you impose on yourself. But curiously, it was in this silence that something began to change. It was as if, without realizing it, I began to look within, searching for myself, realizing that despite the pain, I still existed. I still had value. And it was then, in this moment of deep introspection, that life began to prepare me for a turning point I could never have foreseen. It was a typical Tuesday, one of those days when you wake up with no expectations, just waiting for the day to pass. I was in line at the lottery to pay some overdue bills when, on impulse, I bought a ticket. You know that automatic, almost faithless gesture? Well, that's where it all began. A simple scratch-off ticket. And fate surprised me. When I saw the numbers, I thought I was reading them wrong. My eyes blurred. My heart raced. I reread them several times. And yes, I won the lottery, an unexpected, almost unbelievable victory. I, who had been constantly counting coins to buy bread, suddenly had the jackpot in my hands, and with it came a kind of freedom I had never felt before. The first feeling was confusion, then came fear, because we're taught to be afraid of being too happy. But little by little, I allowed myself to feel. Life's upheaval had chosen me, and I needed to embrace it. For the first time in a long time, something good was happening to me, without having to sacrifice myself for anyone. I didn't tell anyone right away. I preferred silence. I wanted to process everything alone. I thought about all the times I'd given up on myself for love, and how now I had the chance to truly take care of myself. The life-changing impact wasn't just on my wallet, it was on my soul. I had been chosen. It was time to choose myself too. I started dreaming again. Simple things, you know? A little house in the country, a flower-filled garden, a comfortable sofa to read on. I even considered rekindling that old dream of taking painting classes, which I'd always put aside due to lack of time and money. The emotional richness I was about to acquire was, to me, more valuable than the zeros in my bank account. But of course, news like that doesn't stay hidden for long, and all it took was the first clue to leak for him to appear. Out of nowhere, with that practiced smile, with the old, "Hi, Mom," I hadn't heard in a while. And I knew, right then and there, it wasn't a coincidence. It wasn't nostalgia. It was interest. The rapprochement based on interest had begun. And even realizing all this, I remained calm. Because now it was different. Before, I was just a wounded mother. Now, I was a woman with self-worth. And with choices in my hands. Money choices, yes. But more than that, conscious choices. The story would continue. But not the way he imagined. He arrived as if he didn't want anything. A shy, "Hi, Mom," a soulless hug, the kind of gesture that feels more like an obligation than true affection. After so long away, he didn't bring excuses. He brought smiles. Calculated smiles. I knew that look. And no matter how much a mother's heart tries to believe it, I saw. It wasn't longing. It was something else. The conversation started off lightheartedly. He asked if I was okay, talked about how busy he'd been, and said he missed me. It was all very rehearsed. And then suddenly, there he was, complimenting my appearance, saying I looked happier. It was as if he were trying to seduce me emotionally, testing the waters to see how far he could go. Soon came the questions disguised as interest. "Have you been doing anything different? I heard you moved house. How did you manage?" I answered calmly, but inside, everything in me screamed. The needy mother from before still lived there, but now she shared the space with a wounded woman who had learned to see beyond words. The most painful thing was realizing he wasn't even hiding his motive very well. He talked about businesses he wanted to start, debts he needed to pay off, opportunities that would arise if he had just a little push. I, who had already given everything without expecting anything in return, now clearly saw his intention. The rapprochement out of self-interest was almost blatant. But look, I didn't scream. I didn't kick her out. I didn't cry. I just listened. I heard every word calmly, with the calm of someone who no longer needed to prove anything, because I was no longer the mother begging for love. I was the woman who understood that forgiveness without reconciliation is also a form of emotional release, and I was ready for it. He persisted for a while. He tried to stir my emotional memory, recalling childhood moments, inside jokes, even my favorite cornmeal cake. I confess I felt a lump in my throat, because yes, he was my son, but he was also the same one who had discarded me. And now I was trying to get back, not for myself, but for what I had. It was at that moment that something inside me clicked. I needed to act clearly, without visible hurt, without explicit anger, but with dignity. Because when life gives you a second chance, you can't waste it repeating the past. And in that reunion, I knew. My story with him still existed, but it would be written with a different pen. Saying no to a child is never easy. We've been trained to give, to yield, to compromise for love. But there comes a time when healthy love requires limits. And I reached that point. Standing in front of him, my heart trembling, I realized it wasn't anger I felt, it was clarity. I finally saw who he was and who I had become. I took a deep breath before speaking. I said I couldn't help with money, that my priority now was to take care of myself. He laughed, as if he didn't understand. "Since when do you think about yourself?" he asked. And that sentence hit me. That was it. I'd always been a source to him, not a person. A helpful mother, not a woman with feelings. The toxic relationship was evident in every word. I spoke firmly, without shouting. "I love you, but I won't hurt myself anymore because of this." It was hard, you know, because part of me wanted to hug him, tell him everything would be okay. But I knew, if I gave in again, I'd be feeding the cycle that had hurt me for so long. I needed to choose myself. He tried to turn the tables. He said I was being cruel, that he just needed a chance. He tried to make me feel guilty, and he almost succeeded, because mothers carry guilt even for what they don't do. But in that moment, my pain spoke louder. I couldn't allow him to manipulate me again. It had already hurt too much. It was there that I understood the power of self-worth, that loving someone doesn't mean accepting everything, that forgiveness doesn't require coexistence, that the respect I so desperately expected from him, I needed to give it to myself first. And this kind of strength doesn't come easily. It's born from the wound that heals when we stop touching it. Deciding not to give in was my act of courage, a silent revenge perhaps, but far more powerful than any scream, because it was the first time he saw me standing firm, whole, without giving in. And in that look, in his, I realized he knew he'd lost something, not the money, but the chance to be with someone who had always truly loved him. I didn't wish harm. I simply wished peace. And I stood there, my dignity restored. Sometimes, emotional justice comes like this, without noise, without an audience, just with the certainty that you've finally done the right thing for yourself. And after so much time begging for scraps, I finally allowed myself to sit at the table of my own life. Life began to take on a new flavor. It wasn't luxury, it wasn't ostentation, it was lightness. For the first time in years, I woke up without guilt, without that feeling of owing someone something. With financial independence, I gained more than comfort. I gained autonomy. It was as if every choice now had my name at the bottom. I decided to do the little things I'd always put off. I started walking again in the morning, bought a new sofa, painted a wall lilac, just because I wanted to. I made room for simple joy. I made plans to travel alone, to see the coast I'd only seen on TV. And you know what? For the first time, I did it without asking permission. I used part of the money to help an NGO for elderly women, those who, like me, had been forgotten by their families. I heard stories that mirrored mine, of strong, invisible mothers who only wanted respect. That touched me deeply. I didn't just want to spend, I wanted to transform. Emotional wealth was my priority now. I bought a quiet little house, full of natural light, with a balcony for enjoying coffee in peace. I planted flowers. I started writing again in the old notebook I'd kept for years. I rediscovered my own company. I, who was a mother before I was a woman, finally rediscovered who I am beyond the maternal role. And that was liberating. The painful memories still exist, but now they take up less space, because self-love fills them. And when we start treating ourselves with kindness, the world changes color. I understood that dignity isn't a favor, it's a right, and that, as much as it hurts, sometimes the best thing you can do for someone is to walk away. No, I didn't become bitter. I didn't become cold. I simply stopped accepting less than I deserve. And that didn't make me worse. It made me whole. Personal growth doesn't come with applause, but it does come with peace. And my peace now resides in the choices I make, the company I keep, and the silence that doesn't hurt. Today, I live with more purpose. I still love my son, but from afar. I want him to grow, to learn. But I'm no longer willing to pay the price of losing myself for anyone. The unexpected new beginning life gave me came with everything: pain, courage, and above all, restored dignity. And that version of me, I'll never abandon it. Looking back today, I can't help but wonder, how many mothers are out there feeling what I felt? Silenced, discarded, suffering from their own children's ingratitude. A mother betrayed by her child isn't an exaggeration, it's reality. A reality that hurts silently, but can also transform into strength. Because every pain has a limit. And mine has finally arrived. I understood that love requires reciprocity. Yes, that it's not about expecting recognition in return, but about not allowing yourself to be endlessly hurt. Family rejection is a slow poison, and if left untreated, it sickens the soul. But there is a cure, and that healing begins the moment you decide to choose yourself, even when everything around you says otherwise. I'm not saying you need to cut all ties with the one you love, but I do say you need to set boundaries. You need to know that your heart is valuable, that your story matters, that dignity cannot be negotiated or begged for, that sometimes the greatest proof of love is walking away to survive, and that forgiveness without reconciliation is a legitimate choice. We often think that starting over means starting from scratch, but it's not. Starting over means moving forward with more wisdom, less baggage from others, and more space for yourself. I started over at 60, and if I had to, I would start over again. Because courage after pain is what transforms survivors into strong women. And you know, as contradictory as it may seem, I'm grateful for the pain. It shaped me. It pushed me deeper, made me hear my own voice. Today I'm stronger, more serene, freer. And if I could say one thing to any woman going through something similar, it would be, don't be afraid to change. Fear paralyzes. Choice liberates. This story, deep down, isn't about a winning ticket. It's about a woman who, even after being abandoned, chose to rise up. About a mother who stopped waiting for recognition and started recognizing herself. And most importantly, about someone who understood that money can't buy love, but it can buy a new chance at a dignified life. So if you've made it this far, maybe it's because something inside you wants to change too. Maybe you're tired of begging for affection, of swallowing humiliation, of pretending everything's okay. And if that's the case, know this: you're not alone. You deserve more. And sometimes, all it takes is a spark to start all over again. For you, with you, for you. The truth is, every choice has a price, and saying no to your own child, even for emotional survival, hurts. There were days when I questioned myself, when I missed myself, when I wondered if I was being too harsh, but there were also days when I woke up feeling light and understood that this lightness was the beginning of my freedom. Outsiders don't always understand. But he's your son, they say, as if that erases all the pain, as if the blood bond justifies any kind of toxic relationship. I heard judgmental looks, felt whispers behind my back, but I kept my head held high, because only I know what I lived through, and only I can protect my peace. I had to relearn how to live with myself, filling the silences with music, reading, plants, and afternoon tea. Rebuilding my routine with things that made me feel good. It was no longer about taking up space. It was about inhabiting my own life fully, with less noise and more truth. At times, emptiness hit. The kind of emptiness that comes when we let go of a role that defined us. I was no longer the available mother at any cost. I was just me, and that's scary. But little by little, I realized that emotional freedom also requires courage. The courage to stand by your decisions even when the world doesn't applaud. There were also beautiful moments, like when I sat alone on a park bench and realized I was at peace. No guilt, no anxiety, no need to explain myself, or when someone complimented me and I was able to believe them. Because before, every compliment was thrown away by a worn-out self-esteem. Now it found space to flourish. It's curious how, after a storm, the little things shine again. A beautiful sky, an old song, the smell of good food. Life slows down, and we learn to savor it. I didn't need luxury to be happy. I just needed silence that doesn't hurt, companionship that doesn't demand, and a firm choice to live for myself. Do I regret it? No. I miss it, yes. But longing is less destructive than the pain of being used. Today, I know I can love from afar, and that my peace is worth more than any forced reconciliation. The freedom I gained wasn't given. It was built, brick by brick, with each no that saved me. And now tell me, have you ever felt like you gave your all and still felt left out? Have you ever found yourself reliving scenes, searching for where you went wrong, trying to understand why love turned into absence? The truth is, sometimes there are no answers, but there are always choices. And choosing yourself can be the hardest and most liberating decision of your life. Maybe this story reminded you of someone, or yourself. Maybe it stirred wounds you didn't even know were raw. If so, take a deep breath. You don't have to carry this weight alone. Share your feelings in the comments below. This space is yours too, and you deserve to be heard. If this video touched your heart in any way, please subscribe to the channel. We're creating a network of real stories with lessons that can transform, one soul at a time. And if you'd like to see more stories like this, hit the bell. There's so much beautiful, powerful, and true stuff coming. And before you go, tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? It's always special to know how far this story has come. Sometimes we connect through a similar pain, but also through the strength that comes after it. And if you know someone who needs to hear this message, share it with love, because every woman has a story, and sometimes all she needs is to know she's not alone.